We're getting there. Y'all just bear with me a second. There we go. Wasn't anything you did, it was me.
Got music.
Y'all pray for me. The camera's out. I play something totally different than what I practice. So what y'all hear is
Oh, you'll be great. You always,
Always.
always good.
Anyway, our memory verse is found here. It's not a part of our verses. We're going to look at it. It's over in Proverbs 27:4. Anger is cruel and fury overwhelming, but who can stand before jealousy? And I left the bull over there with me. Anyway, 27:4. Our pictures, we're ending up this month. If you have a birthday or an anniversary, and I don't have a picture from you, if you can or you would like to, even if you don't want to, send it so we can all share, your past life, your upcoming, everything like that. And those are, that's a composite of everything that we had for this past month. And look at here, got a news story. Do you remember the plot going back to your old days? Speaking of days of yore, going back to your old days in literature. You remember literature and English and such in high school?
Yes, all that old English.
Hey, did anyone ever read Othello? That was Shakespeare's play.
I think
I probably did. But
Have you ever seen Othello?
no, I've never seen it.
no clue.
Othello.
Refresh our memory.
Do you remember any of the characters from the play? Desdemona? That was the heroine of it? Igo?
Is that her?
Well, no, that's what I'm getting to in this
Okay.
story. Do you remember the plot of Othello then?
No.
Well, we're gonna take a trip to Shreveport to the Strauss Playhouse or something.
Get some culture.
Yeah.
Main characters were Othello, Iago, and Desdemona. She was the heroine. And anyway, it was a story about jealousy, and that's what we're looking at today in today's lesson. I'm just, searching for some sort of introduction. And this sounded good because you all remember the news story that I'm fixing to read you here. Earlier this month, the death of football star and actor O.J. Simpson. Anybody remember him?
No,
I don't remember.
Yeah. He did it.
He's guilty.
Inevitably,
He's definitely guilty.
led a reflection on what was considered the trial of the century. Or led the reflection, the trial of the century. Now they're talking about Donald Trump's trial being the trial of the century. Yeah, so, who knows? But this was in 1995, so that would have been the last century. The murder of Simpson's ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, over there. So a good picture of her over there. And remember what he did to her?
Killed her.
Bludgeoned her.
He nearly cut her head off.
Bludgeoned her, yes.
And her friend.
Yeah.
You know what kind of vehicle he was driving in?
Was it
Bronco.
Bronco?
White Bronco.
Yeah, I didn't see him.
Chase. We saw that on
watched
TV
the
so many
chase.
times,
We
that
did.
white Bronco. Got sick of looking at it.
Bringing back memories here. The murder of Simpson's ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and male acquaintance, Ron Goldman, there you go, along with the arrest and trial of Simpson for the crime, served to spark conversations on many important cultural issues, including domestic violence, the privilege of celebrity, and racial violence. I don't know if you remember it or not, but everybody knew he was guilty. The jury knew he was guilty, but they didn't convict him because they thought the cops and petulant fell and racial bias on top of that.
And the glove didn't fit.
Simpson, there you go. Simpson ultimately was found not guilty in his criminal trial, though a later civil lawsuit found him liable for the wrongful deaths of his ex-wife, Ann Goldman. So he was, found guilty anyway. Then and now, some observers noted that the case also highlighted another age-old problem, jealousy. Some have compared Simpson to Shakespeare's Othello, a tragic figure who killed his wife in a jealous rage. The fictional story of Othello demonstrated the dangers of jealousy running amok, and according to some, so did the true life story of O.J. Simpson. Those who believe he was guilty often point to the devastating consequences of jealousy when it overwhelms people's lives. And again, that's just something in real life that to relate to where we are in our lesson today and looking at. If you read your background passage for this, you'll find it on 82 there. And our central figure, everything swaps around in our story. We'll have 4 more sessions after today in our study of Genesis, and we'll be finished. But all 4 of these lessons, sessions, are going to involve Joseph. Now, who was Joseph? What do you remember about Joseph? Who were we talking about? Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So Abraham was Jacob's grandfather. Isaac was his father. Now we have these 12 sons born to Jacob. And if you remember the details of him running from his brother Esau up to Aram, and you've got your map in the back here. And this is his route going back up here when he ran away and all that happened to him. Then he's come back down here, and then we find him going back up to Bethel over here. God told him to. Then we find him today, in our lesson today, dealing with these brothers and the jealousy that was, I don't know if it was justified or not, but you could understand why they might be jealous. I mean,
Yeah, but Dad.
Well, Jacob and his upbringing, remember his mother was Rebecca. And what she just doted on him. That's an old word, but doted. She doted on him, and he was her favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who was Isaac's favorite?
Esau.
Esau. And remember what happened? Jacob stole the birthright and the blessing. Good at not showing, favoritism, I guess is what I'm trying to say. How dangerous can unchecked jealousy be?
Can lead to hatred. That can lead to,
Violence.
lots of things.
Not only in families, but in relationships outside family. Again, this lesson today deals with the biblical account of jealousy's devastating impact on individuals and families. If you went back one chapter, they skipped over it, but did anybody bother to read chapter 36? We were on 35 last week, and then 36, if you get into it, it's another one of those chapters that you look at, well, what's this in here for? And it's all about Esau and his sons, and God gives the account of who's who. And really, you see them being called dukes and kings and everything. This is the last account you're going to hear of Esau and his family and such. But if you read through it, it lists all those, so-and-so was the son of, and everything. He became a duke. And then in chapter 37, it swaps over to Joseph and the account of his life and all those that came forth out of him, really. Joseph takes center stage. We'll have those 4 sessions on that. If you went back to page 82, though, on your study guide, as I mentioned, people want to be treated at least fairly. Would you think that's a fair statement?
Yep.
Yeah. In truth, we would prefer to be treated better than we deserve. Do you think that's a fair statement?
Yeah.
Most people, if you had your druthers, you'd rather be treated better than what you deserve, And again, in relationships, Sunday school, church, wherever, workplace, at the same time, we're often troubled when we see people being treated better than us and better than what we think they deserve. Why is that? What is it about I guess, what business is it of yours how well someone else is treated?
You could be struggling in life, no matter what, a job or something, and here's somebody that just seems like he just coasts right on up to the top, and
Right past you.
right past me, and here I am down here struggling on minimum wages, We got promotion 2 or 3 times. So that's one way.
So, and we look at that and we say, well, that's unfair.
Yeah.
Well, in what ways could it be unfair? It could be unfair in a lot of different ways. It could be the boss's, favorite, like what we're looking at today in this family and stuff. Could be that the person actually had the ability, the knowledge, and the training that you didn't have or don't have. And that's
Could be money changing hands too.
could be. That happens in a lot of what we see today, not only in business, but in government.
Yeah.
You wonder why things are the way they are? And I was told this years ago, and probably you too, look for the money trail. That's generally, you'll find out why things are the way they are. And I'm not saying that's not every situation, but in a lot of them, that's what's going on. It's money is dictating, changing hands. It says that is when jealousy comes knocking at the door of our hearts. Jealousy is dangerous because it corrupts one's heart and usually leads to more tragic sin. And that's the thing about sin, isn't it? It doesn't stop once it starts. You can maybe you give into a temptation, you commit whatever sin it is. It's always something. It's always adding up. It's always more and more and more, and you can see it. You ever watch Forensic File on TV? Sometimes we'll sit there and there's nothing else on, we'll just let it play. It's unbelievable to me people can be that evil.
Yep.
Did you see that? Bro, came up in the meeting we had this morning for the security team. The guy here in West Monroe in those apartments that took that girl from South Louisiana and cut her up in pieces.
Yep.
I said, in West Monroe. So that's just evil, and that's what Mark said. He said, that's just evil. That's what it is. That's Satan.
Unfortunately, you're hearing more and more of that in West Monroe. Not cutting up
Well,
people, but
Monroe
crime.
washed off there.
Yeah, well, hey, the city in Louisiana has the most crime,
Per capita.
That's all right. Yeah, I know, Monroe.
Monroe, West Monroe, it's tragic. It is. But do you know why you get the kind of government that you have?
Because you vote them in, for
Because you
one
vote
thing.
for it, or you don't vote for it.
Exactly.
We had an election this past weekend. Anybody live in the city limits of West Monroe? Did you vote? Yes. Okay, great. There were, I think, right at 600 people voted. It was a 4.75 mil tax vote on whether that millage would be added, and that went for police and fire. It failed. I'm sure it'll come
It
back
did
up.
fail?
It
It
did
did
fail.
fail?
It'll
Oh,
probably come back up, but like I say, it did fail. And again, so many people, 600 people out of how many people I don't know live in West Monroe City limits. That's not good government.
No.
No more people. Again, it is what it is. That's the reason we get the government.
Johnny.
Yes.
Reason people, in my opinion, the reason people don't vote in elections like that, because they're trying to pass something, and they know people's not gonna get out and vote, and normally they can get their people out to vote.
Oh, yeah.
Like the people that's gonna benefit, because they won't put it when you got a bunch of people going to the polls to vote. They're gonna put it where it's just some little something to go vote on that most people are not gonna miss stuff or do stuff. They're not gonna go vote, and it's most of the time when it's any kind of elections, that's what it's for, and they usually get it pushed through.
But it behooves us all, when we have the opportunity, I think, to go and vote. And again, it's a personal thing. How you feel about it. Excuse me. has a question there. Why is jealousy so dangerous and corrupting also? Why is jealousy so dangerous and corrupting?
Well, that's second to the last sentence to me
What do you say?
answered it. Because it affects your heart.
Okay.
And that can lead to, it says, more tragic scenes.
Have you ever seen somebody that's been blinded by jealousy? Just so eaten up with being jealous that they can't stand it, you know? And they'll cut off their own nose to spite their face and use all these different colloquial sayings as one to be fit and everything. You know, it's not good sense. You just lose sense. You lose all perspective. All they know is they're jealous. Yes, ma'am.
Several years ago, James did there's a local company here in town, and it wasn't cowboy trailers. But anyway, they had several children, but mom had favoritism really strong for one son, and the daddy had it for another son. And they would try to use James, like if they wanted one of the boys to have some money, they would try to use James as one to be the person to give it to him. James, I said, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. You know. And years later, you know, it destroyed their relationship for sure. And years later, one of the sons committed suicide. But you know, they wanted to use James as a go-between to show, and then the dad would try to use it to help the other one out or something. But you know, then, like I said, years later, one of the boys took his own life. But you know, they just didn't do it, and they just kept on any way they
If
could.
one thing leads to another, it continues on, you know. It's sad to see it. Joseph was Jacob's favorite son, and he didn't mind everyone knowing him. Rachel was Jacob's favorite wife. So there's a lot of favoritism going on in this family. And you can imagine if you were Leah, the sister of Rachel, and seeing him loving your sister more, that's who he really wanted to marry. And remember, Leah was foisted upon him, I guess, you know, in the marriage chamber that night. They were blindfolded, and lo and behold, he married her. But to see all this being played out and just it's continuing on and on and on. Joseph was the first son of Rachel and Jacob's marriage. Remember, Jacob's background was Rebekah, his mother, and I mentioned that earlier, and what went on with that. But again, moving forward where we are, a dream is where we start in these scripture passages here in verse 5. If you looked a little bit before that in chapter 37, verses 1 and 2, those some other things that happened there. Before that, let's see. Verse 2 talks about the generations of who's who. Number 3, verse 3. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And if you read your background and commentary on that, not necessarily that it had many colors, it could have many colors, but it was meant to be a coat that was long, probably down to his ankles, and it had sleeves. Normally back then, in those days, they would take a piece of material, they'd cut a hole in the middle of it, they'd drape it over them, and then they'd put a belt around them. That way, if they had to do any kind of work, all they had to do was take that shirt or whatever cloak you call it, and you could tuck it into that belt, and you could have movement in your legs to be able to work, and the arms were free. But if you had a coat on that went all the way to the ground just about, and it had sleeves in it too, you couldn't do a whole lot of manual labor. And that was the point in it. And it could have been many colors too. I'm not saying it wasn't. But who gave Joseph this coat?
Jacob.
His daddy did, didn't he? Yeah. And why did he give it to him? Because I like you best, and you're my favorite, and you're the son of my old age, and you're from my favorite wife. I mean, just here these 11 brothers, actually 10 brothers, by the other Bilhah, and what was the other one's name? I forget her name, the other concubine there. Those sons were from those two, and they're sitting there looking at all this going on, just ooey gooey,
It's almost like it's you just expect them to be jealous after what they had to endure.
And if it was possible for them not to, it would have been great, but again, these men, fell prey to this jealousy. That's where it was in 2 there, 3. And it says, when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him. And they kind of gives rise to that. Well, golly, I wonder why, a Gomer Pyle, time there, and could not speak peaceably unto him. Then on top of that, it says in verse 5, where we go here, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. So he's having dreams, and he said to them, listen to this dream I had. To the brothers, we were binding sheaves of grain in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood straight up. And from my understanding, when they cut sheaves with a sickle or knife or whatever they cut, they'd lay it down, and then others would come behind them. They'd bundle it up in their arms like that, and they'd take a few pieces of whatever the grain was, and they'd use that grain to tie that into a sheaf and stand it up. They got enough sheaves standing, then they'd put other sheaves on top of that. That was to protect it from any rain or moisture or stuff like that if they were going to leave it over tonight. That's what we're talking about here. But before anybody could get around to stacking these up or standing them up, he says, we were binding them, and then suddenly my sheep rose and stood upright while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it.
He should have kept his mouth shut.
I was fixing to say, was this a wise decision, this young man? Possibly he was about 17 years old, I think, when this occurred. And your brothers are all older, grown men. These weren't just boys, his brothers. Some of them were in the 30s, possibly 40s, that age. How would you feel in a situation like that?
Jealous.
Says here in verse 8, his brother said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Is any virtue in just keeping your mouth shut?
Sure it is.
As you get older, especially I'm speaking to the men, do you find that you say less? I know some of you in here, Billy, Laura, others, just about all of you, you just don't say a whole lot. You got to kind of drag it out of you. I don't know if you're that way with your eyes or whatever. But the older I get, the more I say, and I know I'm a blabbermouth at times. I wasn't standing up here if I wasn't. But a lot of times, when I'm not in a situation like this, just keep your mouth shut. You listen. You learn more when you listen, And generally your mouth, I don't know if you're like me, but my mouth's gotten me in trouble too many times.
Vic tells me that all the time.
Tells you that.
But I don't listen.
Again, it is what it is. What are your dreams? Do you have dreams? Where do dreams come from? And where do your dreams come from? I know you have dreams.
They're crazy.
They're what?
They're crazy.
They're crazy. It must be like mine then. I'll be doing what I used to do for work, but the situation would be just crazy things. And a lot of times I'll wake myself up, or I'll wake up and I'll think, if I can get up, I can get out of this dream. And that's what I'll do. I'll get up out of bed to get out of the dream.
I go back
I
to it.
hardly ever think.
And what?
I keep going back to it. When I'm back,
Yep.
it keeps going back to it.
Yeah, when I lay back down, I'll go back to that dream.
And
again.
ask old Vic about his dream.
Vic, what about your dream?
You didn't hear it last week, what he did?
What?
About fighting a bear?
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that,
I woke up though, on the floor with glass all over me. So,
yeah. Ran into the gun case. I had forgotten about that. Yeah, that's a pretty vivid dream.
my whole chest is still blue and purple, and my back's still blue and purple.
It's
Sure
real
is.
Yeah. Was done for gun cats. Yeah.
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 Do you have dreams? When I say dreams, and your desires for the future probably might be a better wording for that. Again, Joseph had these dreams, and we know because we're looking at this in 2020 hindsight. We know what's going to happen to the young man. And we know that one day these sons and this mother and father are going to bow down. Well, the mother's not. But the father is, they are actually going to bow down to him. It's prophetic in a word. In dreams, those were sometimes ways that God spoke to people back then, and I don't deny that He may speak to people today in that way. Primarily, the way He speaks to us is through His Word. I know that. And sometimes it may be a dream.
Well, and sometimes you can have a good dream and be sad when you wake up that it was just a dream, which that doesn't happen.
We
that
should
often.
continue on. Page 85, there's a statement in question there on there. I need to look at. It says on 85 there, the second, under verse 8, it says, "For Joseph to claim he dreamed what he did was the same as declaring God revealed this to him. And this made them hate him even more." And then it asks that question, what are some advantages and disadvantages of sharing our aspirations with others? That's a good word, aspiration. What are your aspirations? Do you have aspirations?
It's the Bible at our age.
Get out of bed. Oh,
Yeah. I ain't made it one more day.
thank you, Lord, I'm still alive.
Move
Get a
away
raise in
from the
your
monthly and yearly things to the daily things.
Exactly. It's the Bible.
But you still, your outlook on life, and doctors tell us, having a positive mental outlook on things. They'll always ask you, the doctors when I was younger never asked me, am I depressed when I went to the doctor? And they'll ask me now, have you been depressed? Are you depressed? No, not really. I might have some down days, but I don't feel like I'm depressed. And I have been depressed before when you just don't see anything, an outlook for your immediate or even long-term, circumstances. But again, sometimes that can be chemical imbalances, other things going on affect that. But again, aspirations and having that positive mental outlook, I think that's all part of it. Even Christians can become depressed at times. But the good thing is that the Lord will bring us back. He will work through that with us. And we'll go to Him and we'll seek Him out. Anyway, we're going to look at next in this. We had the dream first. Now we're going to look at the plot. And this is verse 18 to 22. But they saw him in the distance before he reached him. Before he reached them, and they plotted to kill him. Well, again, back to your map over here, we find this. They had gone out, and of course, cattle and sheep and goats and all this is what they were herdsmen, and that's how you raised your cattle and stuff, was by them eating, grass each day and watering. And the brothers had carried these cattle and goats and sheep and everything over here to, where was I? Here's Dothan over here. Here's Shechem. They were at Shechem. Here's Jerusalem down here. Shechem's right up here. And the scale on this is about 50 miles. Looks like about 6 inches equals 60 miles. So they were a good bit away from home where they were. The book, I think, talks about 100 miles and somewhere, for some reason that figure sticks out to me. But the daddy had sent Joseph to go look for him, to check on the brothers and everything, and to see how they were doing. And he got to Shechem where they were supposed to be, and they weren't there, but he found a guy, and the guy told him, said, well, they've gone up to Dothan. And if you notice on your map and in this, that's a valley. And of course, the valley, that's where the grass and everything is going to be the most lush, the greenest and everything. And so they were pasturing these animals, feeding them, went on up there and everything like that. And then we find them in verse 18. They saw him at a distance before he reached him, and they plotted to kill him. Here comes the dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him in one of these cisterns. and say the ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. And of course, the cistern, I don't know if any of you have ever had a cistern. We never had a cistern growing up. We always had, but I know over in Mississippi, where Texas from, there were people that had cisterns, or they had water barrels.
My aunt
Cistern.
had one.
Do I?
My aunt.
She had a
My uncle
cistern.
had a cistern.
Over there in that part of the country, that huge amount of the limestone, whatever, is fairly soft, and if you go out, then they'd seal them with plastic, and that way the water wouldn't go, be porous and run out of the cistern, and it'd have water, you know, and those are valuable commodity then and now over there, to be able to feed yourself, and animals, get a drink, you know, all of this. But again, you can imagine having to go back to doing that to today's time. You know, people had to provide their own water. It'd be a rough deal, you know. But anyway, they saw him. He said, "Here comes the dreamer." And he said, it's verse 20, "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dream." It says, when Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." And it says, Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. Have you ever been a part of a group or an organization? Maybe a fraternal organization or a group. Maybe it's a book club, Sunday school. You're members of Adult 11 Sunday school. Other groups that you've been a part of. How hard is it to oppose or challenge a group that you're a part of? Everybody decides we're going to where to eat next Saturday? Catfish Charlie's. And you say, "Well, I just really don't like Catfish Charlie's. I think I'm going to go to Chick-fil-A." You say you like Chick-fil-A, sorry, but if you're going to, and you say, "Just to heck with them, I'm going to Chick-fil-A," and they already got Catfish Charlie if they want to. And then next Sunday we come here and everybody's talking, we got pictures, we talking about how good time we had at Catfish Charlie's and all that, like that. How was Cindy feeling? She was the only one that went to see.
Well, it's ridiculous, you know, there you are by yourself, so who did you hurt? Didn't hurt them, they still had a good time. Hurt yourself.
Yeah.
You
Sometimes,
decided-
what my point being, I'm trying to say, sometimes it's hard to go against a group. If everybody's voting this way, it's only a jury, that's a good example. If you've ever been on the jury, I was one time. Everybody, the majority voted to convict, and myself and another guy voted not to. No, it was backwards. Not to convict. We voted to convict. Come to find out, the guy was, you know, the murdering thief, and they let him go. But sometimes it's hard to oppose. We find this going on here in verses in this. Verse 20 that we find here. Let me read it again. Verse 20. He says, "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." So many people have, and this is not just one commentary, but more than one. Do you see any, what is the word I'm trying to think of? How does Joseph picture Jesus Christ? The life of Joseph and who he was. His relationship to not only the brothers, but other people, the situation that's going on in his life. Joseph stood out. Did Jesus stand out? I believe he did, like a sore thumb. Did he go along with the crowd? No, he was just the opposite. You know, he was overturning the money changers' tables. He was just seemed like on purpose antagonizing people. Joseph, we see him telling these dreams, and you think, well, he just really keep his mouth shut. But he went ahead and told his dreams. Remember, before that, he had given his father a bad report about these brothers. We don't know what the bad report was, but he ran his mouth telling his daddy, they did say that, they shouldn't have let it, whatever it was. When he could have protected himself more or less, by not opening his mouth. We see Joseph here in his life. It compares to Jesus and what Jesus went through. And look for the correlation there as we pass through this. Reuben's motives in his plan to rescue Joseph, he had good motives, Reuben did. Part of what Reuben possibly did, he did out of his own self-preservation. What did Reuben hide? He sinned against his father. Remember, Reuben went into his concubine, his father's wife, Bilhah, had sexual relations with her. His daddy didn't do anything about it. And it just, that, I don't know if you've ever had a wound or something, and you pick at it, festers, and this same thing was happening between a father and son there, He could have been put to death over this. And her too, for that matter, being Jacob's wife. But he
So he
didn't
could
do
have
it.
been trying to get back on
He
his
possibly
father's
was
good
trying
side.
to get into back to the good side there, because he was going to take Joseph and restore him, to the dad.
Plus, he didn't want to be charged with murder either.
True. On page 87, I think there's a statement I had written down about that. He says that years later, Joseph learned of Reuben's intervention to save his life, and what he had heard moved him to tears. That's over chapter 42. Joseph didn't know this at the time. He's going in the sister, and they went and sat down and had a meal. He just left him down there, and his sister had stripped his coat of many colors off of him and all this good stuff. And he's down in there all by himself. Then finally, we'll see this pit. That's where they threw him in verse 23. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, thankfully. There was no water in it. What did they do to Jesus? They hung him up on the cross, didn't they? And threw Joseph down into a pit. The cistern was empty, there was no water. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Who were the Ishmaelites? You'll find, and the first time I read this, I looked at it because verse 28 calls them Midianites. They're called Ishmaelites and Midianites. And you think, and a lot of people, this is one thing, one commentary brought up that I read, people think this is an error in the Bible. Well, one place they're called Ishmaelites, next place they're called Midianites. It's no error, they were all sons of Abraham. Ishmael, Midian, these were all, descendants of Abraham by these other wives. These were actually relatives of these boys, that we see. And they were traders, they were trading, they were moving along. And of course, it was arid, rocky, mountainous place. It was, a regular trade route going down here, but they were traveling along for self-preservation to protect themselves. You didn't move around as a single person like these old westerns. You could watch Gunsmoke. And they're out there in the middle of nowhere, and you always get ambushed because they're by themselves. That's the reason you travel together. You went wagon train, a group of people, so there's safety in numbers. And that's what these people were doing here. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood?" In verse 26. "Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." Boy, how humanitarian of him to come up with this idea. Let's don't kill him, let's just sell him. What did they do to Jesus? Judas, he betrayed him.
Betraying for silver.
Got 30 pieces of silver for betraying. And we find here, the brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled him up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver. He didn't get as much as Jesus did. He got 20 pieces of silver for his life. To the Ishmaelites, they took him down to Egypt. Have you ever heard of someone being in a pit of depression?
Pit of depression.
I've heard that phrase used before, being in a pit of depression. Maybe you found yourself in a pit of some kind. Maybe it's a self-dug pit. You ever seen a commercial on TV and old boy's out and it's for an attorney here local?
Oh, yeah.
And he's down there, he's like, oh, I'm digging myself a hole, you know, and he's going down and down and he's digging like that. And then the attorney comes up with a backhoe and he's lifting him up out of the hole, you know. Like that.
Bankruptcy.
Yeah, bankruptcy attorney. Can't remember his name. Anyway, your pit. Have you ever been in the pit? I know all of you have. Some of you are in a pit right now dealing with things like that. Maybe the pit's not that deep, but you got some pitiful feelings. You know, you're in a pit. You see things that are not what are to your liking, what you would desire, what you would want for yourself. Yet you find yourself there in those situations. You have been, you are, or you will be. We'll all deal with those things, feelings, things like that going on. This is what we're seeing here. Jesus and Joseph were both betrayed in this. How might a person grow callous in their treatment of others in a situation like this? What would have been Joseph's worldly response to this? After being drug up out of the cistern and not being killed, he could be thankful for that. But being sold to the Ishmaelites, leaving everything that he knew and loved and everything like this, being carried down into Egypt, and he knew where he was going. He knew that he was going to be a slave. He's being sold into slavery. And just, who would buy him or what his prospects would be in the future.
Could have been angry.
Probably wanting revenge at some point along the line.
There you go.
People are.
And we find out
"I'll get you
later.
back."
We find out later in the story, don't we? Because that was what the brothers all worried about. Just since Dad's dead, he's gonna kill us. Like that. But this man's different. He's more like Jesus in his heart, and he's caring for his loved ones, and again, everything that was going on in his life. Even with Joseph in the pit and then being lifted out and sold into slavery and carried to Egypt, who was still in control of all these events? God was. And we find that at the end of the story. Joseph telling them, what you thought was bad, God used it for good. And who knows, any of us, what we're going through in here, some of the pits that we have been, are in, or will be in, whether God's going to use it for his glory. Because I heard a preacher say one time, it's not about me, it's not about you, but it's all about him. And it's still true today. Genesis 37 ends with the brothers dipping Joseph's coat in blood and lying to their father while Joseph is sold in Egypt as a slave. What had Jacob done earlier in his life with some goat's blood?
Oh, he put it on him so that his father would smell him and think that he was,
He was sacrificed to goat. They had killed the goat, prepared the goat. His mother had the little kid goat as food, and he took the hair and put it. Here he is. He's being tricked just like he tricked. Do you believe in karma?
It happens a lot.
I don't know if that's the right word or not. That alludes to Eastern mysticism, but so many times, whatever you do, it comes back, on you. I think that's my understanding of karma. It comes back. And again, retribution. In the Bible, Proverbs talks about that. Whatever you sow, you will reap.
You made your bed, lie in it.
That's another way to put it. And generally, it will happen. They might have thought they were rid of Joseph, but God had other plans. Mm-hmm. He was at work despite their evil schemes in Joseph's desperate situation that they find him in today. Finishing up, believers should be wise in what they share and with whom they share. Believers must guard against following peers bent on hurting others. That's when it comes to the point of standing up for God, not others. When the opportunity comes to witness for God, not shrinking back. Believers must beware of callousness in their own lives. And I don't know about you, but I can see that in my life. And it's always has been a problem, and probably always will be, as long as we're encased in this humanity, that we find ourselves being callous towards others. Any other thoughts before we finish up? We need to leave it. Lord, would you dismiss us?
Father, thank you this day. Thank you for the blessings that you give us. Lord, thank you for God and we bring us a good lesson, Lord, and thank you for all the people that work in the church and all the teachers and all the pastors and his and all the staff, Lord, bless them all, bless everything that's from you. With your will, Lord, for your will, I want to forgive me for my sins and shortcomings, Christ.
Amen. Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming. See you next Saturday night, but I'll see you
Oh,
before.
it's just coming up.
At where?
It's coming up.
It's Charles.
That's been so cute. Here, let me turn this TV on. YouTube.
Go on. You're all